Example 4, using the distance formula. For this example, we're given a full point, and then we're given a partial point where we're missing the y coordinate. They also gave me a distance. Every problem starts off the same way. You want to use the formula distance is equal to the square root of delta x squared plus delta y squared, which is, I keep saying, it's just a variation of the Pythagorean theorem. Leg squared plus leg squared equal to hypotenuse squared. The only difference here is they've already taken the square root of the hypotenuse and they put it to the other side. Now, as I look at this problem, I'm going to place these numbers, substitute these numbers correctly into the formula. My distance is 4 square root 3, that's a little scary, is equal to my delta x. To go from 4 to 1, I've dropped down 3 units. So I would say this is negative 3 squared plus, and then as I explained in the last problem, you really want to do these problems when you stack them, make sure that your variable's on the bottom, because when you have a variable you're going to subtract and you always go bottom minus top. The delta here is y minus 7. If you're not following that, just look on this side. This would be the same process. We always inspect the numbers and just decide how do we get from one number to the next, but the math behind it is really saying this: 1 minus 3 1 minus 4, pardon me, I said that backwards. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. That's how we're getting our delta. 1 minus 4 is negative 3, and y minus 7 would be your delta y. So I'm simply coming over here. I'll write this as y minus 7. And now I'm going to expand this stuff. We'll look at this part first. Negative 3 squared is 9. And then I really need to FOIL this out. I'll do this on a side note here. If you have y minus 7 times y minus 7, the first with first, y times y is y squared. The outer, y times negative 7 is negative 7y. The inner, negative 7 times y is negative 7y. As I add those up, you owe me 7y, you owe me 7y, you owe me 14y. And then the L for FOIL, last with last, negative 7 times negative 7 is plus 49. It looks a little intimidating because you have these radicals, and we haven't done much with radicals. That'll be a future chapter. So when you look at this, you just want to simplify what's inside this radical. A radical, a square root is the same thing. So you'll say the square root of y squared minus 14y plus 49 and 9 would be 58. On this step, I don't know what else to do. I'm stuck. And so I will have to square both sides. That way I can get this out from underneath the radical and actually work with this radicand. So I'm going to square both sides. As I explained in the last video, if you square a radical, what's underneath it just comes out. So on this right hand side, I will have y squared minus 14y plus 58. On this side, well, you'd have to square both parts of this. So if I square the 4, I get 16. If I square the radical 3, I get 3. And 16 times 3 would be 48. I don't expect you to be able to do that yet. What I do expect you to be able to do is simply go to your calculator and type what you see. So I'm going to do a parenthesis first and say 4 square root 3 and I close my parentheses just like that, and I'm going to square it. And you'll see it's going to give me that same answer I said a moment ago. The 4 squared is 16, radical 3 squared is 3, 16 times 3 would be 48, and that's what it tells me right there, it's 48. So I do expect you to put that in your calculator to be able to square it. Now I'll place that value right here. And then next, I need to zero this out. So this is going to go back to something we learned at the beginning of the year. When I zero this out, I'm just going to take that 48 over. I get a 0 equaling. The 48 comes over as a negative 48. So this would be y squared minus 14y plus 10. Most of the time these things will not factor nicely. And since they don't factor nicely, I'll go to my calculator, I'll cheat a little bit, and I'll find the zeros. I'll find where this crosses the x-axis. Even though I'm trying to find a y value here, it doesn't matter. It's all done the same way. So I'm going to go to my y equals, clear out what I have. I'm going to type that in as x squared minus 14x plus 10. And then I'm going to graph it. Now as I graph this, I'm interested in these two spots where it crosses the x-axis. To find those, I'll go second calc, option 2, which is our 0. And I simply have to go to the left of where it's crossing the x-axis. Now as I look at this scenario, I can see to the left I need to be positive. If I go to the right, I need to go negative. So I look at the y values here. Currently I'm positive, so I hit enter. I move to the right, the y value goes to a negative. I hit enter, and it always asks for a guess, so you just hit enter for a second time, and it'll take you to that value. It tells me my first solution would be y equals, now I'm going to round that to 2 decimal places. In this case it's going to be 0.76. And then I need to find the second 0, the second place where it crosses the y-axis, the x-axis. And so I'm going to go second calc, 0. I'm going to simply scroll to the right. In this scenario, I know I have to go from a negative to a positive. I just like to get close to the point. So here I'm negative. Doesn't matter the value, just as long as it's negative. I put up a wall. I go to the right until it goes to a positive y value. Hit enter, do a guess. And for my second solution, it's telling me, it does say x equal. I am looking at the x, but because my variable was y, I'm writing y. So it's y equal. The x value there, I'm looking at the x value, is 13.24. This is a finite set, means I have 2 answers that I can list out, and I will simply write this as y equals the set, and you want to do them least to greatest. If you're doing it the way I had completed on the calculator, it should already be in the correct order. Go 0.76, that's your leftmost point, comma, 13.24. And there's our 4th example in our series for the distance formula. But our second example of how to find a missing coordinate. When you have your missing coordinate, I think it would be easier if you always just put your variable on the bottom, and then when you do your delta, I think that's going to be the most challenging part of it. When you have your variable on the bottom, your delta would be y minus whatever the other value is. And so then you go to your formula, d equal delta x squared plus delta y squared. I go through the procedure, and then I graph. I have to zero this out and graph. You're looking for the zeros to that graph. Those 2 zeros, which are x values, I know that says y here, but that's because my variable was y. They could use an a, they could use a k or an l. They can use anything they want for a variable. Your solutions are always going to be the x on the calculator. I'm just keeping with my variable there. And so then I wrote it as a finite set, y equals 0.76 and 13.24. Hopefully that helps as you're learning about the distance formula today.